Welcome to the B Circle podcast. Together, let's be all God called us to be. Let's dive in.
Hello, welcome to the B Circle. I'm so glad you're joining us today. Whatever platform you watch or listen on, thank you. Follow and like us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You'll be glad you did, and we're glad you do. So we're glad you're here today. But listen, I want to give a little warning before we get started today. On the program, it's a little more serious. We're going to be talking about domestic violence and abuse. So if you have children in the room, you might want to ask them to go play with some toys or go watch a movie because we might get graphic. And I'd also like to say, if you are suffering from any type of domestic abuse or violence, please call the Domestic Abuse Hotline at 800-799-7233 and let them help you. If you need therapy or counseling, please reach out to betterhelp.com. They will help you through what you've been through. So, Julie?
Yes.
We're going to talk about that today.
We're going to talk about it.
It's a hard subject.
It is hard.
Especially if you've experienced it.
And when you've experienced it, thinking you would never experience it.
And when you experience it and you don't even know that it's domestic violence and abuse you're experiencing when somebody's telling you, what did you do to cause it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't suffer that way. I didn't have to deal with that. I had to deal with just being quiet, not telling anybody what was going on. So I'm going to be real. I was married for a very short amount of time, for about a year, when I was 18. And 19, I'm sorry, I was 19. And in that relationship, almost the day after we got married, things turned sour. You know, and I didn't recognize it, but he would say, "Don't you tell anybody you made me mad." So I got that in my head. So I went through a pretty rough time for about 6-7 months. And people, you know, you always think that it always is this long lasting thing. Thank the Lord. Somehow I got up the courage to tell my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
I did. I couldn't. I did. You know, I was tired of disguising. I was tired of canceling on family events. I was tired of not being present. And my grandpa was a wonderful man, God-fearing, loved the Lord with all his heart. And he was like, "Julie Marie, sit your butt down. I'm going to talk to you." He goes, "What's going on with you?" And I just broke. And I just began to tell him. And not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Some people hide it for years. For years. It was, but it was, you know, I know better now and I recognize it. But back then I didn't know I was a kid.
How'd you get out?
My grandfather and my aunt and about 3 other family members came and packed me up the same day and moved me out.
And got you out.
And got me out. It wasn't like, you know, it was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. There was a lot that happened in those few short months that I don't think, honestly, that I've ever really spoke about. I don't think I've ever really physically or verbally, my husband, but beyond that, I don't think I've ever really spoke about, you know.
Well, it was taboo.
Yeah, you couldn't for a long time.
You couldn't talk about it. And if you, like I said, if you did talk about it, you know, my story is I got married at 16, actually barely 16, to a man who was much older than I. He was 12, 13 years older than I was. And it was much like you say, about 6 months into it, I'll never forget it. I can still feel the slap and the shock and the horror like it just happened this morning. You know, out doing a job with him, checking cattle. And I will never forget, I had a dentist appointment. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to be late for my dentist appointment. You need to take me now." I mean, I didn't have a driver's license or nothing. Right. So, you know, 16. I did keep on, you know, about going to the dentist appointment. And I'll never forget, out of nowhere, he took his fist and he hammered me up against the window. And he said, "Shut up, you're not going to the dentist." And, you know, that was the first incident. And, then of course, after they do that, they're never going to do it again. And
Very
got
sorry.
all this pressure. I was under this pressure and I'm sorry. And I didn't mean to do it, and there's tears and there's all of that. And,
And we buy it.
And you buy it. Well, as a 16-year-old,
Especially the 16-year-old.
I didn't know. First of all, I was 16.
Yeah. What do you know at 16? Absolutely not.
How are you with a 29-year-old man at 16 and living in his world?
Right.
When you've never done anything, it was horrible. So, the forgiveness, you forgive.
Yeah.
And then it happens again. And then it turns into that just anytime you disagree or you say no, you're going to get beat. And you don't tell nobody. I remember having black eyes. And, I have to wonder about people. I would lie and say, oh, my sinuses are just so bad because I had allergies really bad. And my allergies are just so bad. I guess it's just worked its way into my eye. I have big black eyes. And people would just take that explanation.
Yeah, they would.
That, oh, okay, and on the inside, you're dying.
To tell somebody.
You want to tell somebody, but if you tell somebody, you're going to get it even worse unless somebody gets you out of there.
Yeah. I experienced guilt because he was in the military and we were living on base. And he's like, if you tell anybody, they're going to put me in jail. And then what are you going to do? And you should be
going to kick him out of that.
Yeah, they're going to kick him out and they're going to do all this. And so he's like, nobody in my family's ever succeeded to this point in their life. And you're going to ruin that and blah, 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 blah. And I bought into that.
Sure.
I bought into that. And he got really creative of not hitting here.
Other places.
He was other places, or
they learned, didn't they?
Quick. Yeah. I remember, this is pretty graphic, so I apologize, but I remember one night.
Again, if you have children in the room, you might want to have them leave.
Yeah. I wasn't serving the Lord at that time, and we happened to be at a party. And because he thought that I was flirting with a bartender, which I wasn't, I was getting water, honestly. When we got home, he held my head in the toilet. Until I almost passed out numerous times. And I woke up on the floor the next morning and he said, try and tell somebody that happened. He would think of ways to hurt me that other people wouldn't know.
Yeah. And I remember when I finally got the nerve up to tell my brother-in-law, because I felt really close to him and I thought I could tell him. And I walked to his house and I told him what's been going on. And, you're expecting compassion. You're expecting someone to say, we're going to talk to him. But they looked at me and said, what are you doing to provoke that? And I'm like, what am I doing to provoke it? I just have to disagree.
Yeah. And then you start thinking, well, maybe I should
be
kinder. Maybe if I made the right meal, maybe if I did this, maybe if I did that, it wouldn't be as
bad. So I left there and had to withdraw and keep all these things a secret. Mm-hmm. And you walked on eggshells because you never knew when it was going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And because you never knew when it was going to happen, you lived in a constant state, like people would do that and I would flinch. Mm-hmm. And, then you'd have to pass it off. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I'm sorry, you just scared me.
You startled me.
You startled me or something. But it got to the place to where, and I remember one lady said to me, why do you flinch every time somebody raises their hand? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, but I lied.
Of course, you lied.
Again, because nobody will believe you. And I remember one time I was 20 and we already had 2 children. And something had happened that didn't go the way that he thought it should or would have. And he pulled my hair out. Mm. He literally, right back here at this part of my hair, he grabbed a hold of my head, jerked me through the house. And when he got done, he had he had a handful of hair. I had a bald spot right there. Mm. And after it was all said and done, I was like, you pulled my hair out. And he goes, yeah, go get it cut and get it fixed.
It's hard to believe that people can be that cruel. And I'm not saying that people can't be sensitive to it. Until you've walked through something like that, it's very difficult to understand how another human could do that to somebody they supposedly love.
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 And I don't know how you felt in yours, but it got to the place for me, I almost wanted him to hit me because he would make up with me. And then he would show me compassion and show me affection. So it almost got to the point that I craved the beating to then get the love.
Right.
Because otherwise, there was no love.
Right.
He was doing his thing. I was taking care of kids. And it got to the point to where that you lived in a constant state of fear. When is it going to happen again? Right. I mean, you would go to church, and that's when I said, where were people with discernment? Where were people? Right. Where were the people and the men and the women of God that couldn't see past that, couldn't speak into the life, to my life, and to help me? Even my own family. He not only abused me, he abused my brother. He would beat my brother like that, and if my brother didn't do the way he was supposed to do at the job or whatever, he'd beat him and lock us in rooms with mice and just different things like that. And it was an ongoing thing until, you finally escape. And then when you do escape, you escape with the clothes on your back, and then you're the bad person and you're the bad guy. But one of the things I've had to learn, and I don't know about you, and we said we don't like that word triggered, but sometimes I can go in places and get triggered.
Yeah, sometimes I'll go to places and I can look at somebody and I just want to go ask them, are you okay?
Yeah.
We were in Chicago a couple of years ago for our anniversary, and there was just this drunk, belligerent man on one of the cruises we were on. And we got off the boat and we're walking, and we see him up here yelling at his wife or his girlfriend, and she said something, and he took his open hand and just smacked the snot out of her back. Like, we could hear this hit.
Yeah.
Well, I stopped. Like, I'm ready to okay, we're going to get this taken care of. And my husband's like, hold on, we're going to watch for, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I walked up to her, I'm like, are you okay? She's like, I'm fine. I'm like, no. Are you okay? Do you need to go somewhere? Because my heart hurts for people that don't know that other people truly want to help them. I was fortunate that when my family found out, they went into action.
Mine didn't.
And I'm so sorry.
Mine did not.
I'm so
Mine
sorry.
did not. I stayed in that situation for 8 years.
Wow.
And then when I did leave, I had to leave with what I had, and lost my kids and everything in that situation. It was a bad deal. And, even now I can go into restaurants. Sometimes going to Oklahoma is a little difficult for me because it's the same kind of terrain and the same kind of atmosphere that I lived in there. And you can hear a song on the radio that'll take you back there. And there are many times I can even be with my husband, who loves me and treats me like a China doll. And I can be in a place with him and a song can come on and I'll be like, honey, I got to go. I can't stay in here. I just text me when this song goes off.
Right.
Because of the place it takes you.
Right.
In your memory, in your mind, to all those things that happened.
Right.
And, again, if you're suffering from domestic violence or abuse, we want to encourage you. There's hope and there's help out there. Call 1-800-799-7233. Let somebody help you, or go to betterhelp.com and get help. You are not at fault. It's never right for a man to hit a woman, and it's never right if you're a man and you're being abused. It's never right. No. It's not right. It's wrong.
Right.
And we want you to get help. And, we could sit here all day, Julie, and go on and on about the incidences and all that happened to us. Right. But I think it would be good that we talk about the recovery, too.
Yeah, the recovery. And one thing I want to say before we go further is domestic violence isn't always a married couple. I mean, it is children and parents, or I've seen it with, a grown parent or a grown child with their parent that's living in their home. There are many facets and phases of domestic abuse, and it's all horrible. I mean, abuse does not care if you're young, old, Black, white, Asian, Puerto Rican, male, female,
Republican or Democrat.
It does not matter. There's no, you have to be this person to be abused. But when I began the recovery, I didn't know I was in recovery. I moved back home with my grandparents. And my grandpa, God love him. Oh, I had the best grandparents on the planet. No matter how old you were, if you were in his house, you went to church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
That was just the rule. And I mean, at 16, he dragged me out of bed and put me on the front pew of his 400-member congregation church because I didn't want to get out of bed. So he just took me to church the way I looked.
Thank God for grandpas like that.
Thank God for grandpas. But I didn't know. So when I moved back in with them, my grandpa's like, "No, you have to go to church every Sunday." I was like, "Yes, I know." But as I sat there in his church, he had a really good assemblies they went to up in northern Michigan in the UP. And they were preaching about love and hope and just the love of Jesus. I grew up knowing the love of Jesus, sure, but I had got corrupted and walking away from God for a short period of time. And so I began to just let the Lord love on me. I didn't go to counseling. I should have.
Yeah.
I didn't reach out to anybody to help me walk through it. I should have. So listen to me. If there are people that will help you,
yes,
and it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's not taboo.
It's not taboo. It's not, and there's good people that will love you through it and help you through it. But I sat in their church services and I just let the love of Jesus speak to me without realizing at first that the love of Jesus was speaking to me and that, nobody was going to believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when my grandfather found out and he said, "You're out of here." So shortly after this gentleman called me and he's like, "I need to meet with you because I'm getting married, but I can't get married because in his girlfriend's church because they say, blah, 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 and our wedding has to be officially annulled." And he said, "I need you to sign some papers." And I was like, okay, because I just didn't want anything to do with them anymore, and I was so scared. I was so scared that it was a trap, like I was going there. So, I mean, this is crazy now that I think about it, but I took about 8 men with me that I knew and sat them around the restaurant in case he tried something because I was still scared of him.
Absolutely.
But, I sat in church and I let the love of Jesus heal me. And I said, that'll never happen again. Yeah. And unfortunately, two of my kids have had to walk through some of that. And I just let them know once I found out, that's not how it's supposed to be.
Not how it's supposed to be.
It's not. And I'm sorry you had to go through that and that you thought you couldn't tell me. But what abusers do, no matter who they are, they groom you for it to be your fault. They groom you. It's always your fault.
It's always your fault.
You did something to make this happen. Or I'm sorry, I struggle with anger. Just let me work through it. I'll do my best not to do that.
Or they rape you and say, "You can't say anything because I'm married to you."
And I prayed not that God, please don't let me get pregnant.
Yeah.
I prayed the whole time I was married. God, please don't let me get pregnant. Please don't let me get. We do that even when we're walking away from God. That's when we need something. That's your cry out to. And I prayed, God, please don't let me have a baby. So I through the church that he was wanting to get married in, our marriage was annulled, which I was very thankful for. But one of the scriptures, and it's kind of an odd one that the Lord gave me. And this is out of the Passion Translation, is Yahweh tests both the righteous and the wicked. God's very soul detests the lovers of violence.
Yeah.
And I think about that now as somebody and it's been years and years and years. And just like you, though, sometimes things will happen. There's a certain car that we had. And if I see a car that looks similar to that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to look at it. I just look straight at it, But God doesn't he detests lovers of violence.
Yes.
Rather, it's an adult, a child, whoever it is. God's not in that.
No, not at all.
And you've got to realize, and it's hard when you're being abused and your self-esteem is gone and your self-confidence is gone and you don't have anybody to turn to. That's the enemy's playground, just to breathe lie after lie after lie after lie.
Yep.
And that's what happened. I believed the lie of the enemy.
Absolutely.
That this was what it was going to be. It was always going to be like this. I mean, and but once the love of Jesus really began to minister me, I slowly began to realize it wasn't me. I didn't do anything.
Right.
You
I
know,
didn't do anything.
I have a question for you guys because I have never personally went through that. But now both of you have thriving marriages.
Right.
Like good marriages. So how did you transition? And maybe it's a podcast for a different day. But how did you transition from, but what if I get married and it is like that? Even though this man, like, is it too good to be true? How did you transition to the good marriage?
My husband taught me taught me about love. I had never had anybody love me the way he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I realized I could do, because I was a button pusher for a lot of years. And when I realized there was nothing I could do to push him away,
That's right.
and he always came back.
Always.
Always.
Yeah.
And once I said, okay, God, teach me how to love him the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I did. And now, I know everybody knows how much I love my husband. And I don't care if people laugh or it gets on their nerves, or I don't care, because I love that man.
Yeah.
I would do anything for that man. He has taught me what it feels like, looks like to be loved the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I fell in love with him, and I tried to push him away, and he didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
He
came
stayed.
back. He stayed, and I'm
He
so
stayed.
thankful.
Say, well, you had a wonderful grandfather that rescued you. My parents were too busy telling me that God hates divorce.
Mm.
And I remember when my dad said, I'm getting you out of this. And my mom came home and said, we don't believe in divorce, go home.
Mm.
So sent me right back into it, even knowing the things they knew. But I'm so grateful to God because I didn't sit in church and let the love of God heal me. I subsequently became a runner, and I ran from everything, because secrets.
It's easy.
Yeah, you don't tell people, don't tell people this, don't tell people that, don't tell. So you have all these secrets, and so you're running, or then you tell too much, and when you start talking too much, then people are like, oh, So it was
Call you a liar.
I call you a liar, or how did you do that, or why did that happen? But I will remember when I started going to a church here in Kansas City area where my husband actually went to church. He was praise and worship leader there. And I remember sitting in the service one day with just overwhelming grief and pain. And, I remember sitting there saying to the Lord, what do I do with all of this? All this stuff that nobody knows. I mean, here I am, divorced, lost 3 children, had another bad relationship. I've got a child from that relationship. What in the world am I going to do? And that was the day that I heard God's audible voice. I was sitting in the pew, and I heard the Lord, just like you can hear me say, look up on the platform. And I raised my head through my tears, and there stood my husband. And the Lord said, that's your husband.
Wow.
And I said, I don't even like him. I said, I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. And the Lord said, that is your future. And at that time, the little woman preacher was having an altar call, and I wanted to go so bad. But because I had been ridiculed by members of my family for going to an altar call one time, because they said I embarrassed them because I'm supposed to be saved and I went to an altar call, I subsequently never would go to the altar. So I was sitting there that day with my head burning up, tears running down my face, feeling the convicting power of the Lord drawing me to that altar, but sitting there thinking, what is people going to think if I go to this altar? But I finally just said, I don't care. I'm going to the altar. And, have you ever just had to bolt and do something as quick as you could, or you're not going to do it?
Yep.
I bolted to that altar, fell on that altar and started crying. And that little pastor, I'll never forget her. She's like 95 now. She grabbed my face, held my face in her hands, and she said, look at me, Angie. You can run, but if you run this time, you're taking every promise that God has for you, every bit of your future, you're taking it, you're throwing it away, and at the end of the day, you still got to deal with you. And it brought freedom to me. And I made up my mind that day. I'm not running. I'm not running. I'm not running from this. I'm not running from what's happened to me. I'm not going to be ashamed.
Right.
Because shame was such a big, oh, it was so big. Such a big deal. Such a big deal. And I made up my mind that day. I'm not running. I'm not. And a year later, I walked down the aisle and said, I do to Mark.
Wow.
And like Jason, he's taught me same thing. I could push buttons and he would say, shut up. You're not going to make me hit you. You're not going to make me yell at you. Do that all day if you want to. Just go somewhere by yourself and do it. When you're done, come on back and we'll talk. And, it took a minute, because from being hit so much. I said, remember I said you wanted them to hit you so they'd make up with you.
Well, that became like what, quote unquote, what your love language was.
Exactly.
That's how you received love.
So
it had to be violent.
Yeah, pushing those buttons to try to see what he would do.
Right.
Well, he never did.
Yeah.
And now today that's like somebody else's life. I can't even put myself in that.
Right. Yeah. We're totally different people.
Totally different people.
You look back and you're like, how did that person survive?
How'd that person survive and how did that person get there?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know.
I'll be real honest. I got married because I wanted to live with him and didn't want to disappoint my grandfather.
Exactly.
So we got married.
I wanted to say no that day that I got married, but I knew if I did, I'd screw up my dad's church. And I had been told, if you screw up anything that's happening here for us, you better not. So to say no
Was not
that day, I was going to mess up all of this that was going on. So you didn't say no. And, I was too young. 16-year-olds should not get married.
No.
Parents, if you have a 16-year-old daughter, you protect her, you love her, you do everything that you can, you guard her, and you keep her safe. 16-year-olds should not get married.
Right.
They should not. And if you're suffering from domestic abuse, please call 800-799-7233. We want to see you get help. Find you a church where people love God and that they can minister to your need and minister to your hurt and pour healing oil on you.
Right.
And wait on God for your husband. Yes. Don't jump in and marry the first thing that looks good.
Yeah, you've got to take the time to heal.
Take the time to heal.
Yeah.
Get healed. There's a healing process that we must all walk through.
Absolutely.
I'm sure my process didn't look like yours.
Right.
And yours didn't look like mine.
Right.
But we were two different individuals and we had to walk out what had happened to us. We had to deal with our reality.
Right.
We had to deal with our truth and figure out how we can get through these next steps. But with the help of God.
Because
I never want to go back, Julie. However, I will say this. I will not trade any experience that I had, no matter how bad it was. I would not want to go back and not do it again.
Right.
I know that sounds kind of crazy.
To people who don't understand it,
that is part of what made me what I am today.
Yeah.
And I will say this to that man. The Lord allowed me and him to be together 2 years ago. And he apologized to me, which was big. That was a big deal. And I apologized to him. And I think that was the final crossed T that I needed to know I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay because I want him to be okay.
Right.
You know, I want him to go to heaven.
Yeah.
I don't want him to die and be in hell. And I never hated him from it all. And that's one of the things that Mark would say to me all the time is the reason why you're not bitter is you never allowed hate. You know, I never hated. And I know that God, there's a lot of healing that still needs to be done with children and different things. But with him, God brought closure. He brought healing.
Yeah.
And I hope it freed him too.
Yeah.
Because he's not a bad person.
Yeah.
You know, we respond by the way we were raised.
Right. Yeah. And
It's just the truth.
it is. It's just the truth. And, you know, we had that conversation when he needed me to sign the annulment papers. And it wasn't probably until Jason and I were married for a couple of years that I was able to sit down and say, I don't know where you are. You know, I was like talking to him like he's there. But I said, I had to vocally say, I forgive you for trying to kill me.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And that freed me completely.
It frees you completely. That Christmas day when I knew the Lord was dealing with me to speak to him. And when he walked into the living room and I was sitting there and I said, hey, can we talk? I said, you know, there's more behind us than is ahead of us.
Right.
And I don't want our lives to end without making things right. And I began to weep and he began to weep and he apologized. And we hugged each other and I wish him the best. I want him to know Jesus and be saved. But if you're watching, listening today, and you've been a victim of any kind of violence or domestic abuse, Julie and I just want you to know there's hope.
There is hope.
There's help. There's a future. I remember Becky Fender had a song that when I was walking through my healing process that I would listen to over and over again. She said, I stumbled out of bed and I looked into the mirror and I said, who is this stranger that's looking back at me? Gone are the brown hair and in its place is gray hair and there's wrinkles where the smooth skin used to be. And I wonder what went wrong along the way. Was there a road I should have taken that I missed? Then I hear a voice whispering softly in my spirit, don't give up, don't give in, for the best is yet to be. I still have a future.
Right.
God's not through with me. I still have a tomorrow. Just you wait and see. So if you're in any type of a situation, it might not be physical. It could be emotional. And let me tell you, emotional abuse is as bad as physical abuse. God wants you to have a future. He wants to so radically change your life that you are not recognizable. You'll never look like what you've been through.
Right.
And that's what I love about God.
Yep.
And that's what I like to say. I don't look like what I've been through.
That's right.
I don't wear the clothes, my beggar's clothes or my blind man clothes anymore.
Right.
Because God is a good God.
Yes.
And he heard my cry and he showed me mercy and he showed me grace. And because of that, we're able to sit here today and say, we went through that, but we're still here.
We're still here.
Again,
Praise the Lord.
Reach out for help if you need it, 800-799-7233, or you can email us at thebcircle@gmail.com. We would love to pray for you, minister to you. No, this was kind of a little deep, little not so much fun subject, but
It's an important
message to know that God is faithful.
He's faithful. Amen.
Be all you can be. We'll see you next time on the B Circle.
Thanks for watching or listening to The B Circle. If this week's podcast helped you, or if you want to know more, please contact us at thebcircle@gmail.com. Join us next week for more. Remember, be all that God's called you to be.